Hello everyone, welcome back to Review and Rate. Today, we're entering into a world of underwater cities and crazy people. That's right, we're going to kill ourselves and get revived somehow to talk about BioShock 2, a game developed by 2K and released in 2010. If you're a fan of first-person shooters, impressive art style visuals, and emotional stories, you won't want to miss this review. Now, let's adopt the little sisters to rescue them and get ready to enter the world of BioShock 2. The gameplay of BioShock 2 is just like the first game, great, with several improvements but also a few problems that affect the experience. The game plays very similarly to the original, with easy to learn controls and fast paced action. You once again fight mostly the same types of enemies, such as splicers and security robots, using many of the same weapons. Each weapon still has different ammunition types, although several have new designs and abilities. The levels are also wonderfully designed, making exploration enjoyable throughout the game. You still get to use plasmids, equip gene tonics, gather Adam to purchase upgrades, search the environment for items and audio recordings, unlock doors, and progress through the story in a straightforward manner. However, BioShock 2 introduces several changes, some of which improve the gameplay while others feel like downgrades. One of the biggest improvements is that you can now use plasmids without having to switch to them first like you did in BioShock 1. Making combat much smoother and allowing you to combine weapons and plasmids more naturally. Another welcome improvement is the aiming system, which feels much steadier and makes it easier to eliminate enemies from longer distances. Hacking has also been greatly improved, as it's now much faster and simpler than it was in BioShock 1. In addition, you can use a hacking tool that allows you to hack security devices from a distance, making the process much more convenient. There are also no issues with cutscenes, as they play smoothly without a large black screen blocking most of the view like it did for me in BioShock 1. Other gameplay changes include being able to punch enemies while holding your weapon instead of switching to a separate melee weapon like in BioShock 1. Since you play as a Big Daddy, you also get access to the iconic drill, which is a really fun weapon to use against splicers. It consumes fuel while in use, so you have to manage it carefully. A new enemy called the Brute Splicer has also been added. It's a giant gorilla-like splicer that attacks by punching you and throwing heavy objects, making it much tougher to defeat than regular enemies. The game also introduces Big Sisters. Like the Big Daddies, they are extremely tough opponents, but unlike them, Big Sisters are much faster and more agile, allowing them to dodge your attacks and making them even more challenging to fight. These Big Sisters appear after you rescue a certain number of Little Sisters, which is a really interesting mechanic since it punishes you for doing the right thing. You also interact with Little Sisters much like you did in BioShock 1. However, before choosing whether to rescue or harvest them, you can first adopt them. Since you are a Big Daddy in this game, they ride on your shoulders and collect Adam from corpses for you, adding a unique gameplay mechanic that wasn't present in the first game. The game also includes a section where you control a Little Sister, giving you a different perspective on Rapture, as well as sections where you walk along the ocean floor, which help add some variety to the gameplay. Near the end of the game, you unlock a new plasmid that allows you to summon a Big Sister to fight alongside you, which is a really cool ability. However, there are also a few downgrades. BioShock 2 feels noticeably less scary than BioShock 1, mainly because it lacks the memorable horror moments and creepy spicer encounters that made the first game so tense. Another issue is your movement speed. I understand that you play as a Big Daddy and are supposed to feel heavier and slower, but the movement often feels too slow, which became especially frustrating whenever I died and had to replay sections from the Vita chambers. I died quite a lot during my playthrough, so this became one of my biggest frustrations with the game. However, the most annoying aspect of BioShock 2 is its glitches and crashes. I'm not sure if this is a glitch, but the sounds from many of the machines don't play at all like they did in the first game, which hurts the atmosphere of Rapture. The intro before the main menu is also missing its audio, including the short opening cutscene that plays when you start the game. For some reason, the game also occasionally behaves strangely, with the screen suddenly turning completely white while the game continues running in the background. Whenever this happened, I was forced to close the game and launch it again, and it occurred multiple times throughout my playthrough. The biggest problem of all, however, is the constant crashing. BioShock 2 crashed far more often than BioShock 1 for me, and it quickly became one of the most frustrating parts of the entire experience. The game kept crashing repeatedly, which was especially annoying while I was recording gameplay because I constantly had to restart the game and worry about losing progress. As a result, I found myself saving every 5 minutes just to avoid replaying large sections. Eventually, I even stopped saving through the pause menu and relied almost entirely on the quick save button because it was faster and seemed less likely to cause another crash. The only thing that kept me playing was how enjoyable the gameplay itself was. Otherwise, these technical issues could easily push many players away, as they are incredibly frustrating. Now let's talk about the story. The story of BioShock 2 is good and feels a bit more emotional than the story of BioShock 1. Although I don't think it is as good as the first game's story, but it's still enjoyable and worth experiencing. I like that the game once again takes place in Rapture, allowing you to revisit this incredible underwater city while controlling a completely different character. The story takes place after the events of BioShock, following the deaths of Andrew Ryan and Frank Fontaine, making it interesting to see what has become of Rapture. I especially liked playing as a Big Daddy. Even though I wasn't excited about the idea at first, it ended up being interesting to experience the story from a different point of view. It also allowed the game to focus more on the little sisters and introduce the big sisters, giving you a different perspective on both. The people you meet throughout the game are just as interesting as those in the first BioShock. Not everyone you encounter is simply a villain, as many are either trying to do what they believe is right or are victims of becoming spicers. At one point, you are given the choice of whether to kill one of these characters or spare her. If you choose to spare her, she thanks you and rewards you, which was a nice touch from a story perspective.
I've got the maddening notion that I owe you my life, stranger. Such as it is. I'm sending you a care package to the pneumo along the way. I'd appreciate it if you didn't tell Dr. Lamb.
As I mentioned earlier, I think seeing the story through the eyes of a Big Daddy is a good idea, but I personally found it less engaging than playing as Jack in BioShock 1. Since we are exploring Rapture once again, many of the locations and ideas that felt mysterious and exciting in the first game no longer have the same impact. I also wasn't as interested in the main villain, Sophia Lamb. Compared to Andrew Ryan and Frank Fontaine from the original game, she simply didn't feel as compelling. To me, she came across more as a replacement for the previous villains than as a truly memorable character with a strong role in the story. To summarize, the game takes place 8 years after the events of the original BioShock. The underwater city of Rapture has fallen even further into ruin. A psychologist named Sophia Lamb has taken control of much of the city. She rejects Andrew Ryan's philosophy of extreme individualism and instead believes in radical collectivism, where individuals should sacrifice themselves for the greater good. You play as Subject Delta, the first successful Big Daddy bonded to a little sister named Eleanor Lamb. Unlike other Big Daddies, however, your bond with Eleanor is emotional rather than purely conditioned, and she sees you as her father. At the beginning of the game, Sophia Lamb forces Delta to shoot himself in order to separate him from Eleanor. Years later, Delta is mysteriously revived, but because of the bond between him and Eleanor, he will die if he remains too far away from her for too long. Your mission is to find Eleanor before it's too late. Throughout the game, Eleanor secretly watches your actions and learns from the example you set. Sophia believes that humanity's greatest problems come from selfishness. To solve this, she plans to create a perfect selfless person. Her plan is to gather Adam containing the memories and personalities of countless people, transfer all of those memories into Eleanor, and transform her into a living utopian human who exists only for the sake of everyone else. However, instead of creating the perfect person, the experiment overwhelms Eleanor with countless memories, personalities, and emotions. Because you chose to act compassionately throughout the game, Eleanor ultimately rejects her mother's ideology. She realizes that caring for others doesn't require sacrificing your own humanity. During the final battle, Eleanor rescues Delta and escapes Rapture with him. After escaping in a bathysphere, Delta is dying because his body has reached the end of its life. Rather than simply letting him die, Eleanor absorbs Delta's memories, personality, and values through Adam. Delta peacefully dies, knowing that the kindness and compassion he showed throughout the game have become a part of Eleanor.
You will always be with me now, Father. Your memories, your drives. And when I need you, you'll be there on my shoulder, whispering. If utopia is not a place, but a people, then we must choose carefully, for the world is about to change. And in our story, Rapture was just the beginning.
Now let's talk about the graphics. The graphics of BioShock 2 are very similar to those of BioShock 1, and they are still good, especially thanks to the game's excellent art direction. The new locations look just as impressive as those in the first game. Since both games take place in Rapture, the environments maintain the same unique atmosphere and style. The character models are also very similar, although there are some new characters and enemy types that help add a bit more variety. Just like the first game, however, while the visuals still look good overall, they are beginning to show their age and can feel a bit outdated by today's standards. Now let's move on to the sound. The sound design in BioShock 2 is just as amazing as it was in BioShock 1. Everything from the voice acting, the splicers, the new enemy sound effects, the environmental audio, and the soundtrack is fantastic. Since the game takes place in Rapture once again, the audio does an excellent job of bringing the city back to life and maintaining the same immersive atmosphere as the first game. Now let's turn to the final section, replayability. When it comes to replayability, BioShock 2 offers a few additional ways to keep playing, although there isn't a huge amount of content beyond the main story. The game includes a multiplayer mode, but unfortunately it's essentially unplayable today due to the lack of active players. There's also the Trials mode, where you complete various combat and challenge scenarios while fighting different enemies. Another addition is the Minerva's Den DLC, which tells a separate story centered around another character in Rapture. It's an interesting expansion that adds more content for players who want to spend more time in the game's world. Overall, replaying BioShock 2 is still fun, and I can definitely see myself returning to it in the future. However, it is a little harder for me to come back to than the first BioShock because I enjoyed that game more, and the constant crashes in BioShock 2 make replaying it much more frustrating than it should be. Let's now summarize everything with my overall impression. BioShock 2 delivers great gameplay, a good story, good graphics, amazing sound design, and some enjoyable replayability options. While the game suffers from frustrating technical problems, especially its glitches and frequent crashes, these issues, although they hold the game back, never take away from how fun the gameplay itself is. I still prefer the original BioShock over the sequel, but BioShock 2 proved that revisiting the same setting with meaningful gameplay improvements can still be a very enjoyable experience. Despite all of its crashing issues, it remains a great game. As a result, it earns a lower score than BioShock 1, but still receives a great score nonetheless. Here it is. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more insightful review videos. Feel free to share your thoughts on whether the points I've raised resonate with you or if you have a different perspective, and leave your suggestions in the comments about which game you'd like to see reviewed next. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and thank you all for watching.